Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد. So we've now reached one of the major milestones in the Seerah. I'm just trying to think of the words to kind of really explain the event that we've now reached. So this is the story of the Battle of Khandaq. And in the books of Seerah and amongst many of the scholars, this was probably considered to be the most unprecedented, unexpected, and probably the most dangerous event that occurred for the Muslims. And as I try to explain a little bit more details, you'll get an idea. So let me just give you some context in terms of the background of Battle of Khandaq. So last week we spoke about some build up to the various expeditions that occurred, the build up towards the Khandaq. So many of these, there's a few expeditions that occurred. And the general gist of the Seerah so far as we got is, as Muhammad has established Islam in Medina and now really propagating Islam quite heavily around the Arabian Peninsula, Muhammad is also protecting the Muslims at the same time. I mean, he's taken control over trade routes. He has created new alliances with different tribes, not necessarily all of them supporting him. Some of them have done it for their own personal benefit. Regardless of which reasons people have taken it, Muhammad has basically positioned himself politically as a very serious power in the Arabian Peninsula, and probably the most how would I say it? Probably the most impacting thing that he had done. We talked about last week is how Muhammad even basically dared to go to the regions or the borders of the Roman Empire to start dealing with some of the tribal organizations that existed there that were creating problems for the Muslims. And he went to the Roman border, knocked on their door and said, basically, we are here, don't ignore us. And so that's going to leave us into something else at a later stage. So having talked about these events, that leads us into the Battle of Khandaq. Now, if you remember, we talked about how there were the three tribes of the three Jewish tribes in Medina. So if you look at this particular map, hopefully, inshallah, if it's large enough that you can see, you'll see that there were three tribes: Banu Nadir, Banu Nadir, Banu Nadir, whichever way you want to call it, Banu Qurayza and Banu Qaynuqa. And this particular tribe, Banu Nadir, was ejected from Medina because of the breaking of the treaty that they had. So Banu Nadir left and they went off to Khaybar, which is north of Medina. Now, obviously, they haven't forgotten as to what Muhammad had done to them. And remember that Muhammad had taken over their vicinity in Medina, so the fortresses of Banu Nadir in Medina, he had taken them. And the only deal that Muhammad broke with them and said to the Banu Nadir, you take whatever you need, okay? Whatever your riding animals can take, you can take that. And subhanAllah, they were such characters, the Banu Nadir, that they even took the doors of their homes and they loaded that up onto the camels alongside with their wealth and so forth. And because they didn't want to leave anything for the Muslims, they tried to destroy their own homes as well so that the Muslims couldn't live in there comfortably. Regardless, they took their stuff and they went to Khaybar. And when they went to Khaybar, they didn't just stop there. This thing that happened to them was just eating them from inside, and they just could not leave it alone. They wanted revenge. They wanted revenge against Muhammad and the Muslims, and they did not want to leave them, in that position where they had power and control. So what did this lead into? Well, Banu Nadir were not going to sit there comfortably, just sitting there and start their new life at Khaybar. With the unification of the other Jews in Khaybar, Banu Nadir decided that they're going to form an alliance. So what they went and done was they traveled from Khaybar all the way down to Makkah to have a meeting with Abu Sufyan and the other chieftains. And so this conversation was very, very interesting in terms of this relationship between the Banu Nadir and the Quraysh. So when they arrived, so some of the characters from the Banu Nadir and the other Jews of Khaybar were people like Salam bin Abu al-Haqaiq, people like Huway bin Akhtab. All of these are very senior characters, and you'll know these people because I mentioned them in the earlier stories about how these were the two Jewish leaders that when they found that Muhammad SAW had turned up to Medina, they wanted to confirm whether he was the prophet, and they checked and they confirmed with each other that the signs were there that he was the prophet, but yet they did not agree to follow him. So these tribes went to Makkah and they sat down with the leaders, in particular with Abu Sufyan, and they said to the Quraysh that, look, we are in a situation here now that if we come together, if we form an alliance once and for all, you know that Muhammad and his army, Muhammad and his men are a big problem for us financially, economically, militarily. And from a social, political, religious perspective, this guy is dominating. We can't allow him to stay where he is, because if he stays where he is, eventually he will kill all of us. He will get rid of all of us. So Abu Sufyan agreed. I mean, Abu Sufyan took a battering from, the Muslims in the several wars that occurred. He could hardly say that the Battle of Uhud was a win for him. It was a stalemate situation. And even in when we talked last week, when they went for Battle of Badr version number 2, they didn't get that far. Abu Sufyan, for whatever reason, didn't have the heart to carry on to go for war, because he felt that they didn't have a bumper economic year, and it wasn't right for all the people of Quraysh to come out and to fight when they're financially not in a good state situation. Because if you go out to fight and you get killed, what have you left for your family? Nothing. You haven't even made any money from the previous year. And so they turned back. So when they came back to so obviously when they came back to Makkah, they were berated by the people in Makkah, the Quraysh. So Abu Sufyan, he liked this idea, what Banu Nadir was saying, alongside with the other Jewish tribes in Khaybar. But he had a bit of an issue. He had a bit of a thing that he wanted to clarify with the Banu Nadir. And he said to them in a conversation, he said, I understand what you're saying, and I understand the suggestion that you're making for us to engage in warfare against Muhammad with the alliance of other people. But I have one question that I want to ask you. He said, look, you are the first people to receive the scriptures and the knowledge in those matters which we, as the idol worshippers, that we differ from Muhammad. You are the original people who have the original scriptures, right, from this religion of Judaism. But I want to understand something. Your religion, this Judaism, in my opinion, is much closer to the religion of Muhammad. But if you're closer to him, why are you making an alliance with us? So clarify to me, give me this confidence. Which religion is better? Is it ours or is it his? And please understand that we respect your opinion because you're the most learned in this subject. And the Banu Nadir responded back, knowing that Muhammad Muhammad's religion was much closer to theirs. In many aspects, there's a lot of things that the Jews do that the Muslims do. I mean, we know even from the early stages before the Qibla was even changed, Muhammad used to pray in the same direction that the Jews did. They originally fasted the same days that the Jews did before Ramadan was introduced. But they wanted to get the support of the Quraysh. They wanted to get support of these people. And they responded to Abu Sufyan as saying, your religion is definitely better than his. You are closer to the truth than he is. And it's from this when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayah of the Quran, which then prompted Muhammad sallam as to what was going on behind his back. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Nisa in verses 51 to 52, it is of those people that Allah revealed the words, and he said, have you not seen those who were bought a share of the book? They had a portion of that book. and they believe in idols and evil powers. And then they said to those who disbelieve, the Quraysh, these are more rightly guided, i.e. the Quraysh, you are more rightly guided than those who believe, i.e. the Muslims. Those are they whom Allah has cursed, and whoever God curses shall find none to help him. And so this was revealed to Muhammad Sallallahu via Angel Jibreel, and Muhammad Sallallahu received this inclination, something is going on that doesn't feel right. Now, Muhammad Sallallahu, remember, he had scouts that were continuously moving back and forward in and out of Medina, because Muhammad Sallallahu was living in a very hostile situation. We talked about previously how Muhammad Sallallahu was in that dilemma where constantly there were different tribes coming in, trying to attack him, trying to deal with certain situations. So he was constantly sending out these scouts, listening out, chasing, trying to listen to information. Now, these scouts realized, and they were watching Khaybar very closely, so they noticed that the Banu Nadir had left Khaybar and made their journey to Makkah as well. So they knew, and they reported back to Muhammad Sallallahu that Banu Nadir have gone down to the Quraysh. There must be something going on. It was only until when, after making this agreement between the Banu Nadir and the Quraysh, that the Quraysh were pleased by the response of the Banu Nadir in regards to their relationship with them and the closeness of who was closer to them in terms of their religion and their belief. So when this was established, Abu Sufyan made the decision, we're going to go for this. I think this is the final break. If we come together, we can definitely defeat. So they shook hands with the Banu Nadir, and Banu Nadir left. What the Banu Nadir went ahead and done is that they made their way towards the tribe of the Ghatafan. Now, if I just bring up, inshallah, if I bring up one of the maps. Now, if you look, for example, in this particular map, what you will see is the various tribes that exist in around Arabia. So the Banu Nadir, they took a journey going past Medina, going north, even past Khaybar, and they went to see this tribe called the Ghatafan tribe. Now, the Ghatafan tribe were a huge tribe. And I mentioned last week that they were basically a really nomadic tribe out in the desert, didn't really have any wealth. And what they would do is if they would raid caravans, they would take hostages, they would take slaves. That's how they made their money. So the Banu Nadir went to see the Ghatafan tribe, and they knew the Ghatafan was a very powerful tribe in that region and who had many allegiances with the smaller tribes. And they made a deal with the Ghatafan tribe where they agreed, the Banu Nadir agreed, that the half of the produce of Khaybar, the date palms, half of the produce of the date palms in Khaybar will be paid to them if they participated in the alliance with the Quraysh against the Muslims. Now, the half-year produce in today's equivalent is a lot of money. We're talking millions. That's how much money that was promised to them. And so it was a non-brainer. It was really not difficult for them to make that call, because remember, the Ghatafan tribe were mercenaries. There are people for hire. If the price is right, they'll do whatever you want. So the Ghatafan tribe themselves, when they made this agreement and they were happy, then approached all the various other tribes in the regions. And you can see where the Ghatafan tribe was. If I bring up another sort of map, you kind of see. So this particular map, you'll see that the Ghatafan tribe went to all the various other tribes in the regions. People like the Banu Fazara, the Banu al-Harith, the Banu al-Murrah, the Banu al-Ashjar. There was many different groups and tribes that existed, and they enlisted them. Now get an understanding what's happening here. These tribes, the Banu Nadir has gone to the major kingpin tribes, and those tribes are now gone to the smaller tribes and enlisted them. The Quraysh tribe also then went to the tribes closer to them in the area of Najran, and they went to people like the Banu Amr, the Qindar tribe, the Banu Khab, etc., and they enlisted their support. Now, if they didn't participate themselves, they sent slaves. The Quraysh even enlisted a large number of Abyssinian warriors, mercenaries, and they also joined. So now, so you have to appreciate that Muhammad Sallam is now hearing news coming back to him. Now he's got scouts out hearing that the Banu Nadir has gone to the Ghatafan tribe and enlisted them. He's now hearing news that the Quraysh have gone out to the area of Najd and gone to the other various tribes enlisting them. Muhammad Sallam began to realize there is something huge happening here. There is an army that is being prepared against the Muslims. So this created a huge concern for Muhammad Sallam. One of the sources that Muhammad Sallam one of the sources of information that Muhammad received, and so you don't forget, there is one person that still lives in Makkah that is very close contact with Muhammad Sallam. Who was that? That was his uncle Al-Abbas. We haven't talked about Al-Abbas for a while. We talked about when Al-Abbas came to the Battle of Badr and Muhammad arrested him. And at that point in time, when he was a prisoner of war, Al-Abbas realized that Muhammad truly was a prophet, even though he said he was a Muslim. But the fact that he participated in Badr with the Quraysh, though he did not really want to fight, he was taken a prisoner of war. But there was a point where his heart solidified in terms of being a Muslim, because Muhammad reminded Al-Abbas about his conversation with his wife before he left for Badr, which made Al-Abbas convinced that he was a prophet, because nobody was there in that conversation. So he went back to Makkah with the agreement with Muhammad that he would give him inside information. And so Al-Abbas, when he found out that the Banu Nadir came to see Abu Sufyan and so forth, he sent a slave out to see Muhammad and said, look, a massive army is being prepared against you. So in this situation now, Muhammad realizes we're in big trouble here. So he calls for one of the Sahabi, they call Adhan, and all of the Muslims, the Ansar and the Muhajirun, to the local people of Medina and the immigrants that came from Makkah, all gathered up at the masjid. And there Muhammad he addressed all of them. And he said to them, while they all looked at him, he says, something is about to happen, something that's completely unprecedented. We have faced many challenges, but this is probably one of the greatest challenges to date. And he told them what had happened and what was about to happen. You can just imagine the shock and the fear. Now, you have to remember, as much as their iman is so strong, they are human beings like everybody else. You imagine if Slough or London or wherever you live is the only place where Muslims are, and everywhere around you is surrounded by hostile groups, organizations, and communities. And one day they all decided to come for you. And in your locality, you have children, you have parents, you have your wives, you have people that you love. And now you've been told in 10 days, effectively, there is an army coming that we have never faced before, and they're going to come and get us, and we have nothing. So the shock to them was huge. And so Muhammad Sallam, what he always does whenever there is a war, whenever there's a preparation of war that's going to happen, Muhammad Sallam calls upon his Sahabi and he says to them, I seek upon your knowledge and your experience. What do you suggest? Everyone went quiet. What can we suggest? You're just telling us there's a huge army that's coming, an alliance of army that is coming against us, and we are one small little city. What can we suggest? We have no ideas. Except for one man by the name of Salman bin al-Farsi. Salman the Persian. You know, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes things happen in our lives. And they something might happen to us 10 years before, 5 years before. Something might happen to you now that you begin to realize that event happened for a reason, and that reason may only occur 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line. Salman bin al-Farsi, and I don't know if any of you guys remember, but we covered this story, how Salman bin al-Farsi was from the area of Persia. And being from the area of Persia, which is obviously and if you look at this map, this is the Sassaninian tribe, which is effectively where Iran was. And he came all the way there because he was interested in the religion, the monotheistic religion, and he traveled all the way there to find the truth. And when he came across some Christian priests who taught him about Christianity and they were dying, he wanted to learn about the truth. They said to him, in our scriptures, there is a prophet that is going to arrive and he will come from the area of palm trees. So he believed that area might have been Khaybar. So the way that Salman al-Farsi, subhanAllah, he was from a very rich family. And the way he ended up coming into Arabia, because he escaped from his home because they wouldn't allow him to get out, he ended up coming into the Arabian Peninsula as a slave. And when he came there, still looking for the truth, and he ended up in Khaybar, he realized it wasn't Khaybar that this new prophet was going to arrive. And eventually he got bought by a Jew that came from Medina, and he took him to Medina, and there he was enslaved. And that's when Muhammad sallam, when he first arrived into Medina, Salman bin al-Farsi went there to go and check out if Muhammad sallam was a true prophet. And obviously he was given indications by the Christian priest that you will know if he was prophet because he will never accept charity. Okay. And there was few other conditions. And when he went there, he found out that he was a true prophet. Now, Salman bin Farsi, because he was a slave, was unable and he became Muslim at the time when Muhammad first arrived, when he saw him in his convince, but he was unable to attend the Battle of Badr or the Battle of Uhud because he was still a slave. It was only when Muhammad planted these trees for the Jew, because that was the agreement. Salman bin Farsi wanted to free himself from these Jewish master by saying that I will plant these trees, and these trees will give you X amount of money, and that will be my payment. And Muhammad planted these trees for Salman bin Farsi because there's barakah in Muhammad, and it was only about 3 or 4 years later when these trees ripe, then the freedom was given. So now Salman bin Farsi is now with the Muslims. So when Muhammad asked everyone, what do you suggest? Salman bin al-Farsi, when he realized like nobody responded, he put his hand up and said, can I suggest something to you, Messenger of Allah? He said, where I come from, the land of Persia, whenever we are being attacked, specifically by people with riding animals that can make leaps and bounds, we dig trenches. We dig trenches deep enough and wide enough that the horses can't make the jump. And that gives us the ability and the advantage of preventing them from coming over to our land, and we can fight them. Immediately, Muhammad loved this idea. He thought this was a phenomenal idea, and he jumped on this and said, "This is exactly what we need to do." So, the preparation was made. That Muhammad told the Sahabi, all the army that was there. Now, I just want to try and give you an idea of the people that were enlisted. Remember, Medina consists of the Ansar, which were the two tribes, the Aus and the Aus and the Khazraj, and the people from Makkah. And don't forget, there's people also, the hypocrites. The hypocrites that existed in Medina, and don't forget, there's one Jewish tribe that's left, which is the Banu Qurayza. So when Muhammad gathered the people, everyone showed on face value, we are with you. So that number was roughly about 3,000 men. But let me tell you, when the preparation occurred, and as it got closer to the battle, Muhammad did not end up with 3,000. Many of these people, they left Muhammad, and they left Muhammad, and I'll tell you why they left Muhammad. It is revealed in the ayah of the Quran. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah An-Nur, and I'll read this and it'll explain to you what happened. Allah said that the believers are only those who believe in Allah and His Messenger. This is a very profound statement. You can only be a believer. You can only be a Muslim if you believe in Allah and His Messenger. And belief is not just a statement. Belief means you accept Him in terms of your spiritual aspect, and you believe in Him in terms of your actions, that you must follow Him and not deny the actions that He has given you. When He tells you to pray, you must pray. If you deliberately leave your salah, there's a question mark about you. When you're asked to fast and you leave the fast, there's a question mark about you. And Allah said, and if engaged with Him in a joint effort, when you engage with the Prophet in a joint effort, then do not leave without seeking His permission. If you're working together, then do not leave until you have permission from the Amir. In this case, it was Muhammad Sallam. Those who do seek your permission are those who believe in Allah and His Messenger. And if they do ask your permission to attend to some affair, if they say to you, "Oh Muhammad, I must go somewhere," then permit them to whichever of them that you want and ask God to forgive them. So if they ask you permission to leave, then you decide whether you want to give them the permission or not, and ask Allah to forgive them, for Allah is indeed forgiving and merciful. Do not consider the messenger appealing to you while among you the same as you making appeals to one another. Allah is well aware which of you steal away in hiding. Because there were people that even though they were supposed to be working, they were disappearing without telling Muhammad Sallam or the Muslims. Let those beware who oppose his orders, lest trouble or painful punishment afflict them. Let those who do run away and do not tell their or do not get the permission for the Prophet, let them realize that a punishment will afflict them. No, indeed, all in the heavens and all on the earth belong to Allah. He well knows what you do. On the day on which they will be returned to Him, He will inform them what it was that they did. God is aware of all things. So I often said to people that be very fearful of this. You can't hide anything. The day of judgment isn't just a day of judgment for the fact that you'll be accountable, it's a day of humiliation. When you come in front of Allah, you will try every little lie, anything to get through the test, not to go to hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring up the big highlight reel and He will show you and everyone else that is watching, this is what you did. This is what you did, hiding away in your room, doing things you shouldn't be doing. This is what you did when you said to your mom and dad, I'm going to the masjid, and you didn't actually go to the masjid. Everything will be revealed. So what was happening was, even though there were 3,000 men and they were there to support Muhammad Sallam, remember the weather, and I haven't mentioned this, it was absolutely freezing cold, -0 temperatures. The wind had a massive big wind chill factor. It was so difficult, they could not sustain themselves. People found it difficult to survive. And the Sahabi were working hard. And you know why they were working hard? Because Muhammad ﷺ was the first one to get his hands dirty. Most leaders, most generals, most amirs, they don't do this work. Even under the Islamic State, later on, you'll find that these so-called caliphs, they will not get their hands dirty. The Prophet of Allah, what did he do? The moment that they decided to dig the trenches, Muhammad ﷺ was the first one who rolled up his sleeves and he started digging. Some of them didn't have tools. They had to use their hands. There was no wheelbarrows. They were digging the trenches and they were taking the mud. They were carrying it in their clothes. We know that Muslim top was off and he was carrying the mud in his shawl or his jubba that he had, and he would carry it on his back, because one of the Sahabis said he kept on going in and out of the trenches. Muhammad ﷺ used to have a hairy chest that we could not even see his hair because he had a thick layer of dirt around him. This used to motivate the Sahabi that, look, our Prophet is doing this. If we want to achieve paradise, if we want to achieve something great, then we need to be doing as much as him. And this gave them motivation. So these Sahabi, they went out. But the others, the hypocrites, the one who are weak of heart, what did they do? They wouldn't even ask for permission. Some did. They would lie. They went to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said, Ya Rasul, O Messenger of Allah, my wife is sick. My father is sick. I need to go back. Do you give me permission? I will return. And so Prophet ﷺ used to give them permission, but they lied. And that's what Allah Ta'ala said, that you know what you did, and I will bring it up on the day of judgment. And then they went and they never came back. It's like, it always reminds me, you know, those people when you're like, how much effort does it take to do something small? We struggle to pray the sunnah. We struggle to go to the masjid, pray tarawih, even when we're tired because we've eaten too much. Right? All these little things. I always use these stupid little examples because these are big feats. These are big challenges. Yet they struggle. We struggle with the smallest things. And they disappeared. And yet Allah is saying, even though your Prophet may have given you permission, I know what you are doing. I know what you are doing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but Muhammad doesn't know who's telling the truth and who isn't. So when the news came out about digging those trenches, just give you an idea now. The weather, it is cold. SubhanAllah, look outside now in the UK, it's freezing cold now. And it was colder than this. They didn't have fluffy jackets and boots, they had sandals. The scholars say the trench, now I just want to kind of give you an idea of the trench that was dug. So if we just kind of look at, let me show you this diagram here, okay? This is showing Medina, and if you look at the diagram further up towards the top part of the diagram, this is the north of Medina, and where the arrows are at the bottom, this is the southern part. So I want you to understand how Medina looks. The two sides of Medina, the east and the west side, is volcanic rock, okay? But you can't enter from this side. This is a natural protection. The southern part, where you see, the writing may not be clear, but where Banu Qurayza are, the Banu Nadir, they were the southern part of Medina. This was the Beverly Hills, right? This was a really nice, fertile land. This is where the Banu Nadir and the Banu Qurayza, they had acres of land where they just grew loads and loads of palm trees, date palm trees. Because I want you to understand something, date palm trees in the locality of Arabian Peninsula is like gold mine, literally gold mine. That's why, like, if you in Makkah, there is no date palm trees in Makkah. Okay, so they rely on this kind of business. They want the business from Medina for people to sell them dates, because they can't have dates. You can't grow them in certain areas. There were so many trees in the southern region of Medina, it was impenetrable. You cannot get an army to come through those trees, impossible. So that created a natural border. Okay, so the east and the west and the southern part of Medina was completely protected. It had volcanic mountains and heavy, heavy trees that you could not enter. So the only way you could enter, and we talked about it before, is from the north, where Uhud was. Okay. So when Muhammad ﷺ was given the idea of the trench by Salman bin al-Farsi, he went out there with the Sahabi, looked around and thought, where could I build this trench? Where would I have a natural protection of against the enemy? And the trench was dug in the northern part in this 90 degrees line. That trench was approximately, they say, about 2 to 3 kilometers long. And the width of that was about 13 foot, right? So probably, 2 lengths, almost like 2 lengths of 2 human beings, right? That's the width of it. And the depth had to be deep enough. Okay, we would probably say 1 meter to 2 meters in depth, right? Now, let me explain to you. For every 40 meters that had to be dug, and so 40 meters would be a pretty large garden size, okay? For every 40 meters, there were only 10 men digging without any tools. Few of them had pickaxes and so forth, but there were no tools. In the freezing cold, this is what they had to deal with. If you don't have iman, if you don't have belief, brothers and sisters, this will put anybody off. Even if you had good iman, if I can push you to a certain degree, you would break. That's why I say to you, I remember us having trouble in the winter when it used to be Ramadan, just trying to get out of our nice cozy houses after we've eaten to just go for Tarawih, just to pray to Allah. And yet we had cars with heating. Nobody asked you to walk. Yet we didn't have the ounce and the dignity and the strength of our iman to do the little things like this. So you could almost excuse these people if they found a way to just not join in. But given the seriousness of the situation, they knew it was a life and death case. As for the women in this area now, in Medina, this was a big concern. Muhammad SAW had to protect the women and the children and the old. So in this region, within Medina, there was a fortress, and this is not the fortresses of the Jews, because we know the Jews, the Banu Qurayza, Banu Nadir, they had fortresses there. But the one tribe of the Banu Haritha, one tribe in Medina, they built fortresses just like the Jews. They copied them. So they agreed that all the women and the children will go within the fortress to be protected. So now Muhammad Sallallahu is thinking, right, I've got the women and the children in the fortress. I've got the Banu Qurayza who have a pact with us, an agreement with us, and they're now covering the southern region. So if there's any attempt of these armies to come from the southern, they are there with their armies as well to protect that region. Okay. So Muhammad Sallallahu has now covered all his bases as much as possible. But keep in mind, he is thinking twice about Banu Qurayza. You know why? Because how many times have Banu Nadir and Banu Qaynuqa, the other Jewish tribes, caused him headache and problems? Yeah, many times. So he's keeping a very close eye on this situation. The planning in the way that Muhammad done this gives Muhammad a strategic advantage, even though he doesn't have the arsenal and the numbers compared to what he's about to face. Having the trench there just means you can't, the armies that will come through would have to try to jump over that, and they will struggle to jump. And Muhammad can place the army, the Muslim army, around that trench. So the Muslims, they start and they begin to dig. And as they begin to dig, this becomes a very difficult challenge. So Muhammad, as I mentioned before, goes there first. He goes out there, he starts working. This motivates the Sahabi to do as he is doing. One morning, remember, they have about 10 days to do this. 10 days to dig 2 to 3 kilometers of a trench that is 13 foot wide, 2 meters deep approximately. That's 40 meters for 10 people. That is impossible. That's almost like, how are you going to do that work? Freezing cold, and they are poor. Muhammad Sallallahu, he went out and he saw the Sahabis suffering from the hard labor and their hunger. And he made a dua to Allah, and he said, "Oh Allah, their life is indeed that of the afterlife. Forgive the Ansar and the Muhajirun. There is no better dua from a prophet to make for you than to forgive you, to ask Allah to forgive you." That is a superb dua, because remember, they're just human beings. They make mistakes. But Muhammad is continuously making dua, Ya Allah, there is no life except for the afterlife. Ya Allah, forgive them and let them go straight into paradise. And there, the Muslims, they used to respond back and say, we are those who gave allegiance to Muhammad for the jihad, the holy work, forever, for as long as we live. Because when they heard this dua that Muhammad was making with them, they responded in a very positive way. So this was the continuous. As they were working, Muhammad would keep making this dua. Keep making this. Oh Allah, there is no life but after that, but that of the hereafter. Forgive the Muhajirun and the Ansar. And so Muhammad, as he's working, he's taking the mud and the dirt out. He will sing and recite. You know, like when you're working as a team, you sing and you recite to keep you occupied, to make you forget about the pain you're going through. And so Muhammad, he used to say, "Oh Allah, without Allah, we would not have been well guided, nor would we have been charitable, nor would we have prayed. So do send down tranquility upon us and make us stand firm when we meet the foe. They have wronged us. If they want trouble, we'll resist them." And he kept on raising his voice when he said this. And they would return back and they would say, "Oh Allah, without you, we would not have been well guided, nor would we have been charitable." And they would repeat what Muhammad has said. This is how he kept motivating them. But remember, they are men. They are humans. And there's a breaking point for everyone. SubhanAllah, there are some beautiful stories of commitment and motivation for these people. There were a couple of events that happened that really confirmed the people about the prophethood of Muhammad Sallallahu. Jabir ibn Abdullah, remembered last week we talked about Jabir ibn Abdullah with the riding camel that was very old and slow, and Muhammad Sallallahu prodded that camel and then said to him, "Make me a deal with your camel, let me buy it." So Jabir ibn Abdullah, he narrates in this hadith, and he said how the difficulty that they had in digging just one patch of hard ground. If you're a builder, if you ever done work like this, if you dig, it's nice when you got soft clay ground. But when you hit a rock, you know how painful, annoying it is. So Jabir ibn Abdullah is saying that they got to one area where there was a patch of hard ground. They couldn't even get into it. And so they complained to Muhammad Sallallahu. So Muhammad Sallallahu, he asked for a pitcher of water. So basically just like a container with water. So Muhammad Sallallahu, he spat in it. Now remember, anything from the body of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's a hadith about this, that and the many hadiths is that anything from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his hair, his saliva, everything from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is barakah. Even Muslim does not know it's a gift that Allah Ta'ala has given him. That people touch you, if they take your blood, if they take your skin, if they take your hair, if they take the water that comes off your body, there is barakah in this. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he took this pitcher of water, he spat in it, and then he made a dua. And then he sprinkled that water over that very hard ground. And those who were there, they swear that immediately as Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam just sprinkled the water over it, that ground started to crumble. It couldn't, and to the point that even when the Sahabi, they touched it with an axe, that ground could not withstand the axe or the shovel, it just fell apart. They witnessed this with their own eyes in such difficult situation. And you know, you can imagine when you're digging a trench, you're doing this hard work, nothing is changing, it's not moving the situation, you're on a status quo. When this thing happens, you think, subhanallah, there's like 10, 15, 20 of us trying to break this, and this man has just simply sprinkled water over it. How is this even possible? So you see the motivation and of these Muslims that are building up. Then subhanallah, one of my most favorite stories in this, you know, Jabir ibn Abdullah, subhanallah, he said that whilst they were down there and they were digging and working, he said, I saw Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam come out from the trench, and I felt so upset because I saw this stone that was tied very hard around the stomach of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to compress his stomach, and because they hadn't eaten for 3 days. There was no food, they were poor. Because in the winter, nothing is growing. The livestock is just about surviving. And he saw Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam crawl out of the trench with the dirt on his back, and he noticed this massive big boulder of rock tied to his stomach to compress his stomach. And he noticed also some of the Sahabi done the same. He realized Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in 3 days was malnutritioned. Jabir ibn Abdullah went to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, please, Messenger of Allah, allow me to go home now, just for a little while. Didn't tell him why. He said, just let me go home. And therefore, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you can go home. Jabir ibn Abdullah, he ran home. Now remember, Jabir ibn Abdullah just got married, and remember his wife, she was around about 29 years old, 30 years old. She was an older woman that he married, and she was very wise as well. So he came running home and he said to his wife, what food do we have left? She said, Jabir, I have basically a little small sack of barley and a baby goat, right? Barely just to feed anyone. He said, okay, turn this barley, make some bread, and put this goat, sacrifice the goat and basically put it in a pot and start cooking it. Subhanallah, Jabir ibn Abdullah goes back to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when he sees Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, Ya Rasul, I have a little food. Do come along with 1 or 2 of the men. He didn't want to be embarrassed. He goes, I only have food to serve maybe 2 or 3 people. If we, even if we share, and have little, maybe 2 or 3 men. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Jabir ibn Abdullah, Jabir, how much is there? He said, there isn't a great deal of food. He said, okay, tell your wife not to take do not take the pot off, meaning keep the meat of the goat being cooked in there, okay, and do not do anything with that bread, right? Do not move that bread, and I will arrive to eat. So Jabir ibn Abdullah goes back. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam turns around to all of the Sahabi, and there are about 800 of them. He says, Al-Muhajir Ansar, Jabir ibn Abdullah has prepared food for us. Jabir looked at Muhammad's face, ran back home, and he's screaming, Inna lillahi wa inna rajiun. To Allah belong, to Allah we return. He's in a panic, and he says to his wife, oh, please don't be angry with me. It's like, when you don't give notice to your wife, by the way, I've just brought, the whole football team back for dinner. Your wife, you know exactly what's going to happen. So his wife responds back to Jabir, said, what's the matter? He said, I told Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just you and a few other people, maybe 2 others, I have food, come join. And he's now invited all 800 of them. His wife said to Jabir, does the Prophet know how much food there was? He said, yes. He said, then he's the messenger of Allah. Don't worry. Muhammad Sallam arrived. And when he got there, he said to Jabir's wife, you serve the bread, I will serve the meat. And he told the Sahabi, come in tens. They came, she broke the bread. Sorry, he broke the bread because the bread he took from her, and he kept on pouring the stew of the goat into the plate. Jabir bin Abdullah was watching. He said 1 came, 2 came, 3 came, 4, 10 came, 20 came, 30. He goes, I kept looking to the pot, and the pot still had food in there. The bread never stopped. He said, Wallahi, he goes, all 800 turned up. Some say 1,000, and there was still food left. And then when they had all eaten, Muhammad said to Jabir's wife, he said, now take this food, feed yourself, and feed anyone else that you know that need food. This is the karama, this is the barakah of Muhammad. So this was amazing event that had occurred. One of the other amazing events was when Salman bin al-Farsi, he was in a position in one part of the trench, and he came to a massive big boulder, a white big boulder, and he tried to break this. Instead of the rock breaking, the axe started to break. And he became very, very frustrated as to the fact that this boulder would not break. So they called upon Muhammad Sallam. Now at the time there were 6 men that were digging, okay, with Salman bin al-Farsi, and they just could not get this thing broken. So they called for Muhammad Sallam. So Muhammad Sallam came over and he saw this massive big boulder there. And he took the pickaxe and he spat in his hand and he held that rock, the pickaxe, and he swung at the big white boulder. And when he swung at it, the first piece broke. When the first piece broke, he said, from the first, he said, the castles of Al-Hira and the cities of Khosrow were lit up to be seen like the fangs of dogs. So what happened when Muhammad hit the rock, there was a huge light that came out from that. And even Salman bin Farsi fell back and he said, what is this? And then Muhammad said, Angel Jibreel just announced to me that my nation will be victorious over them. Then he took a second big hit from the second, and he said the red castles of the Byzantium, meaning the Roman Empire, were illuminated in front of me. So as Muhammad hitting this, all of this is shown in front of his vision, and as though they were fangs of dogs. And he said, Jibreel announced to me that my nation will be victorious even over the Roman Empire. Then the third strike came, and the castles of Sana'a were lit up like the fangs of dogs. And he said, Jibreel announced to me that my nation will be victorious over them. So be joyful at this news. Now you have to imagine, when you're in a situation, you can't even break a boulder. Yeah. Now, actually, before I give you my explanation, this was the response of the hypocrites. When the hypocrites saw this and they heard what Muhammad said, they said, he tells you that he can see from Yathrib, meaning from Medina, the castles of Al-Hira and the cities of Khosrow, and they will be rendered up to you. Yet here you are digging the trench and you can't even overcome some rocks, which is a true statement. You can't even overcome this small little challenge, and you're talking about that you want to take over the huge lands. Yeah, you want to take over these huge lands of, of Khosrow and of Persia and the Roman Empire. So here you see just an idea that how Muhammad Sallam, the people out there, and they're digging and digging, and the hypocrites are saying, "Listen to this man. He's trying to give them false hope." But the Muslims, the Sahabi, they knew, they believed that Muhammad Sallam, what he was saying was the truth. And this inspired them. This gave them so much heart. They gave them so much heart, yeah, as to what, the fact that Muhammad Sallam is giving them this inspiration. So you see that even in difficult stages, this event that was occurring, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had pushed him through Badr, he pushed him through Uhud, he pushed them through all of the other smaller challenges, even when they were weak, all the little skirmishes that people were trying to attack them on. And this was the greatest test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to push the Iman even to another level, to push them to a certain direction. Now understand what is going on. Okay, a few more minutes just to give you an introduction now into what's happening. The Quraysh have taken their army and they're making their way up towards Medina. So if we look at so inshallah, if I find a map here, maybe this will help. Let's see if I can find a better one than this. Okay, so if you look from here, there's Makkah, right? Actually, this diagram is a good diagram. So, I talked about the fact that Angel Jibreel said to Muhammad Sallam that you will conquer all of these lands. This is now basically the green arrows, right? Indication of where Muhammad Sallam conquered. So from Muhammad Sallam, and then after he passed away to Abu Bakr Siddiq and Umar Khattab, you can see all of those green arrows that where Muhammad Sallam went all to the regions and how he conquered them. So Persia, yeah. So when you say Khosrow, look at the orange here. This is the Persian Empire. Look how big it is. That's why the hypocrites laughed. They said, are you having a laugh with us? You're telling me he's going to conquer the Sasanian Empire, the Persian Empire, Khosrow's empire. And then we're talking about the Byzantine Empire, which is huge, who is going to conquer this as well. And Sana'a is the Yemenis Empire, which is the southern region, that he was going to conquer this. And Muhammad Sallam done most of this in his own lifetime and then carried on by Abu Bakr Siddiq. But the Quraysh are now prepared from Makkah to traveling up to Medina. The Ghatafan tribe, who were up here near Dumat al-Jandal, further south from that, they took an army coming and meeting the Quraysh tribe in Medina, and they met at the area of Uhud. When they came very close, to Muhammad Sallam's shock, he could not believe his eyes when he saw the number that turned up. The number was approximately 10,000, some say 15,000. The Ghatafan tribe mustered up 6,000 warriors, and the Quraysh mustered up 4,000 of them. And they were a mixture of various tribes, but led by the Ghatafan and led by the Quraysh. So obviously when this army came, they positioned themselves in the only locality where they can enter, which was the northern part of Medina. In the meantime, something else was happening. The Banu an-Nadir, the leaders of Banu an-Nadir who went to see the Quraysh army, they managed to enter into Medina. And when they entered in Medina, they came knocking on the door of Banu Qurayza. The leader of Banu Qurayza was a man by the name of Khab bin Asad. Huyay bin Akhtab came knocking on his door and he said, let me in. Khab bin Asad said to him, what are you doing here? You need to leave. I don't want any trouble. I have given my allegiance to Muhammad and he has been good to us. You need to go. And this Huyay bin Akhtab said to him, let me in. The only reason you're not letting me in is because you're so tight, you do not even want me to share your food. Khab bin Asad became embarrassed. He opened the door and he said, what do you want? This is where now the trouble began on the inside, which was a bigger problem for Muhammad Sallam, because Huyay bin Akhtab managed to convince Khab bin Asad to break his treaty with Muhammad Sallam. And eventually Muhammad Sallam heard about this, and there became now a huge problem because now he had an internal compromise.